But tonight will be the night that I will fall for you over again. Don't make me change my mind. I can't live to see another day. I swear it's true. 'Cause a girl like you is impossible to find. Impossible to find. Because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you over again. Tonight will be the night that I will maybe change my mind. Fall. Because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you over again. Don't make me change my mind. I won't live to see another day where it's true. 'Cause a they, them like you is impossible to find. They, them impossible to find.
my sense is that at TYT, I think, my sense is that at TYT, they saw Hassan make just a ton of money and have a huge amount of success. And I think there was, in certain parts of TYT, there was resent. And, I don't know Anna particularly well. I'm not sure that we've ever actually met in person.
Well, she's a big fan of ours, though, so I'm sure she's watching, Sam.
But I get the sense that she's watched our program too.
I think that's really a lot more common than people who, Sam, it seems like you've been, I mean, I know for a fact you've been at this a long time. You actually believe that you could have done other things and you decided to put politics first. I feel like a lot of people, they just realize, oh, yeah, hey, man, a lot of dumb people will watch right wing YouTube and they'll praise me and they'll send me super chats and I won't have to stand on my feet for 8 hours a day. I won't have to work in a cubicle. I can be praised all day. And I don't know about you, but Gavin and I have been scratching our heads over here. We're not sure if it's something in the water over in that particular part of California. If we're going to be revealed that, whatever the treatment facility is under some sort of like an Enron scandal of the modern age where the water's just no good at the faucets of the Young Turks network. But we've seen Dave Rubin, who I think fits that description of Tim Pool to a T. And then you have Jimmy Dore, who also, he can't resist. He has to go down the right wing rabbit hole, right? He has to go and humiliate himself. But now we're seeing a third barrel or a third individual start to circle the drain. And I want to know what you think about it, because Anna Kasparian has recently announced her unalignment from the political left. She said she no longer feels that she can be considered one of us in times like this. And she wants to talk about the real grifters, not Jimmy Dore, not Dave Rubin, not the litany of conservatives that are making money hand over fist defending and rampaging on behalf of the criminal, bloodthirsty siege of the people in the Gaza Strip. I'll zoom in a little bit more so you can see, Sam, but she says the real grifters are the progressive branded nonprofits that have repeatedly misused public funds. Why won't the left call them out? And she goes on to talk about how she's voting against an increase in taxes for nonprofits to prevent homeless people because she still wants to be able to complain about it as her number one issue, in my view. She says, I'll be voting no on Measure A, which is to plan to raise another $1 billion through what she calls a regressive sales tax to build homeless shelters, housing, and other services. So the big grift is taking away money from the hard-earning people like Anna and giving it to homeless shelters and other NPO organizations that are interested in combating what is a serious crisis in Southern California. But that's not all. If you go back a little further, you could see her most recent article where she talks about how gangs are taking over Aurora, which is a suburb outside of Denver. I happen to have spent a lot of time in, and I can report back safely that there are no gangs taking over this poor suburban enclave, as even
I did drive to Springfield, Ohio, too, because I was in the area, and nothing was happening in Springfield at all. It was actually a really boring town in the middle of nowhere. Of course, you would think it's a war zone or some type of overtly violent place, but it's really just another poor town that's rural. And it does look like many parts were revitalized by immigration. I do remember you. Yeah, back in 2020 when we were all children. Now we're all very depressed.
Even their Republican mayor notes. So I'm just wondering, what is it that makes people do this ideological pivot in their late 30s?
Well, and just to add to that Aurora thing, 2 points. I can't help myself. One, the Aurora thing, it turns out those guys in that video weren't even part of a gang. That video that went viral apparently coming out of Aurora, I guess it was like a week or two ago.
I don't bring people on because I don't really stream anymore. When I do stream, it's just for fun at night. I've been making videos the past month. I don't know how long that'll go. I would do streams if I had actual things to do in a good schedule, but I'd have too many busy things.
The police said they're not part of a gang. I'm not familiar with Measure A. Although I do think sales taxes, I do have a problem with sales tax being a little regressive. I would do a different type of taxation, but I don't think that's her point. Um, the I I think, I mean, look, I came from this. I came from a world where, you know, I was working with a lot of people who had at when I left that world, you know, at least in terms of profession.
You think Trump's gonna win? I think Donald Trump is gonna lose, but there's a good chance that they're able to cause enough chaos and legit get votes switched over. Or not switched over, but just make it so that many votes are thrown out. And I don't know if our process can catch up to it in time on election day to make sure that votes are counted accordingly. I know there's going to be tons of lawyers and all that stuff, but it's too hard to keep up with the chaos. For Kamala to win, she's going to have to win by a lot in each state, which I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know how much I trust that the votes are going to be counted correctly. I know, for example, many of the leaders of local election offices, because he's running the worst campaign in American history, and he is down right now. The pollsters that are making the national averages close are far right funded, and it's intentionally making it close. Dems do have 10 times more lawyers than Biden did in 2020. But I know, like, the leaders of, you also need enough cops that are on board and military and National Guard. You need to have everyone ready, because I know many leaders of local election offices who are election deniers. And if those county clerks or whoever it might be decides to say, hey, I don't think these are valid, I'm not going to send these to the state, then we're going to have some county by county issues. And they are a part of a literal cult, so I don't know what they might do. It's really hard to tell.
My predictions are totally nonpartisan. They have nothing to do with my political views. I predicted the two most conservative presidents of our time, Reagan and Trump, and predicted liberals like Obama. If I predict,
yeah, and Elon Musk directing everyone to go to Polymarket and predict it to buff up those numbers is wild. And we know that you can't use Polymarket unless if you're either overseas or on a VPN. So the people betting money on those websites are the most degenerate internet people, 4chan Twitter users in the world. So that's not determinant of anything. And before Elon Musk directed everyone there, Kamala was up in the odds on Polymarket, by the way. She was up like 54, 48, or whatever it was at the time.
Predicted according to my political views, I'd be useless. I wouldn't have correctly called the last.
Okay, it depends what you mean by winning. Is it winning the election or winning the actual vote count? Because I think she'll win the vote count in every state, but Republicans are really good at throwing out votes, so it's hard to say.
10 elections. I've never been fought before, and I'm 77, been frightened for the safety of myself and my family. I am now. If 6 or more of the keys go against the party holding the White House, they're predicted losers. Fewer than 6, they're predicted winners. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I hear you. I can't believe we...
Based off what data do you think Trump's going to win the election? Because his performances in town halls and interviews in the past 3 weeks have been atrocious, and Harris's have been pretty good, pretty consistent. What metrics are you going by to think Donald Trump's going to win? And I'm seeing much more Harris signs than I saw Biden or Hillary combined right now in Pennsylvania.
Finally did this.
I know that's not numbers, but...
time.
Well, the only thing that matters is that we're here now.
Right. I only ask you speak slowly and loudly. I'm hard of hearing.
Okay, I can speak loudly. I'll try to speak slowly, but sometimes I
can hear you just fine. Let me make sure my volume is tuned up. It's not, so I'm going to tune it up. Speak again.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Beautifully. I am ready to go whenever you are.
Got you. Hold on. Let me get your camera loaded for my stream so everybody can.
Republicans lead in the economy and immigration every single election, though, and they lose every election by the vote count. And Trump should have lost to Hillary. He only beat Hillary by like 10,000 votes in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, whatever other states. Republicans are always up in the perception of the economy and immigration because people just say they're better on it because they're always more racist and angry about it. even though Democrats are much better on both of those issues. It's really sad that people think Republicans are better on immigration and the economy. It's crazy.
Can see you.
I'm not sure they want to, but you never know.
Oh, they do. Don't worry. All right. Okay, there we go. All right. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, getting ready to run. I'm training for the National Senior Olympics in the 1500 meter and the 800 meter run. I qualified in the Maryland Senior Olympics.
Congratulations. I think I don't remember who it was, the New York Times or somebody you did an interview with.
He's a beast. He's 77 years old, and he can run pretty well. If I'm able to move like that when I'm 77, dude, that'd be fantastic. He's running the 800 meter in the senior games or whatever. That's crazy.
But you were doing the running thing as well, so nice to see that.
Yes, they did. Right on the spot in the Maryland qualifiers.
Very nice, very nice. Man, so I don't know how much you know about me, but I scream at people online over political stuff. Obviously,
Okay, yeah, that's my main argument, is that this country has many voters who are misinformed. That's the only reason Trump is close, though. That's the reason he's close. Every poll still has Kamala up. And I think the polls right now are weighted in a direction to make sure it looks close, because polls don't want to seem biased. The media only cares about not being biased or not looking biased. They don't care about any actual fact or anything. So, I mean, I agree. But the inflation aspect, when you look at the overall economy and the purchasing power of the dollar, we all know it's recovering. It's really hard to look at the stock market every day surging and still say, you know, the economy's bad, all that kind of stuff. I think the momentum with that messaging is dying down a little bit. They might have made a push on the Trump campaign side about inflation way too early, and it just looks silly when Trump is saying the world's falling apart when it's not. People know the world's not falling apart. And the only way they believe that is if they're caught inside the propaganda bubble of X.com, Elon Musk, and Donald Trump, which is possible, by the way. And if Donald Trump wins this election, I think the next 4 years of American life is going to be terrible. We're going to have a huge market crash. We're probably going to have global conflicts arise that we haven't seen for 40 or 50 years by the severity of them. Things are going to crash terribly if Trump wins. So let's just hope that doesn't happen somehow.
Obviously, in this election, I mean, as have been the case with the past two elections, people have been obsessed with trying to predict who the winners are going to be, with some people arguing over pollsters and, 538 Nate Silver and election models and all this. And you have the keys, the legendary keys, of which I'm sure you've received equal parts compliments and harassment for how you do these. Yeah.
Yes, I've been doing this for over 40 years. And
yes, I will always be in rural Pennsylvania. No matter where I live, I am in rural Pennsylvania. Every place I am is rural Pennsylvania.
4 years, I make half the country really, really mad at me. And after 40 years, I'm sure the whole country's really mad at me. And I definitely get attacks and criticisms every time. And I have never experienced the kind of hate I've gotten this time. The most scurrilous, vulgar, anti-Semitic, even violent kinds of feedback. I've never experienced quite that.
Hey, I think it's good to be pessimistic and optimistic. It's good to be motivated. We want people to think it's close no matter what. Even if Kamala was up 5 points, we'd want people to think she's down 1 point. That's the mentality everyone needs to have. My biggest concern with Donald Trump is he wants revenge. He wants retribution. Is really the Supreme Court, obviously. Retribution. I think I said that wrong. But the Supreme Court, obviously. And violent militia groups, when Trump just says to them, hey, go kill some liberals and I'll pardon you, that's when we're going to have like a huge crisis. I think Donald Trump's going to do that if he's president. At some point, he's going to do that. And then we're going to have to talk about pardon powers of the U.S. president, and then there's no way to hold him accountable. If Donald Trump loses the election, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the U.S. military fighting a war against militias within the U.S. So like in Washington, D.C., I would not be surprised if there was an armed militia from Donald Trump's supporters marching on the Capitol, and our military actually needs to fight them like it's a war zone. Those are my two like doomsday scenarios here.
Before, and it's just an example, I think, of how Donald Trump has created this violent.
Yeah, okay, and pausing again, what Cloud just said about the Electoral College and dirty tricks. The thing is, they can focus. It's really easy to tear things apart, and they can focus exactly where they need to do fraud and where they need to throw votes out, because the election is taking place in like 2 total states right now, maybe 3 total states are up for grabs. So if we have 3 states you can actually win, then you can know where you have to do voter suppression. And we have Elon Musk boosting Jill Stein now. And yeah, Elon Musk is dumping so much money in that we cannot fully track. It's absolutely disgusting. It's probably, he's doing many illegal things as well, but there's not enough time to hold Elon Musk accountable at all. That those take years to get someone that rich even on trial for election crimes, let alone if Donald Trump wins and he can pardon everyone.
Before, and it's just an example, I think, of how Donald Trump has created this violent, toxic political environment.
I hope that happens. I hope they squash it.
I'm even afraid for the safety of my family, to be honest.
But we don't want people trying.
Wow, guys, we have 2 more.
We want no one trying, okay? We don't even want the attempt to be made, and that's one of my biggest concerns. If the last January 6th had at least 5 guys who were fully armed, it would have gone terribly. Like, even worse. They would have got, like... That's the thing about January 6th. It was bad, but it wasn't bad enough to get this reaction from people. So it was bad enough to scare people, but there were no active politicians or elected officials captured or killed or kidnapped. So no one took it as serious as they could have. But we were like 1 degree of separation away from having a historical turning point, civilizational moment right there, dude. Like, terrible. Like, that could have been a wild day if they came more strapped than they were.
What?
30 to 45 minutes.
Okay. Just so I have it in the back of my head. One thing that said, so I'm 35, and obviously, I'm in the mindset of this is the most important election ever. We're more.
Okay, I'm gonna pause one more time before trying not to pause for a little bit. Do I think Trump can win legitimately? If every person who right now should be able to vote is able to cast their ballot and those votes are counted, there is a 0 chance Donald Trump wins this election, even with the Electoral College. But I know there's a guarantee that Republicans in Georgia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, a bunch of other states, they are going to be successful in getting some ballots thrown out. We need the margins to be big enough in these states where if Republicans can throw out 100,000 ballots, Kamala can still win. And that's why it's so important that we have everyone not voting for Jill Stein. But yeah, I don't think there's any legitimate way with everyone that should be able to vote now that he would actually win. But there are legal ways to take people's votes away that are still accessible.
5. And obviously, I'm in the mindset of this is the most important election ever. We're more divided than ever. But people say that like every election cycle, right?
Right.
Music is more degenerate today than it ever has been. And they've said this since for all time.
Yes.
It does feel like things are different though, right? But I mean, we've always said that. Do you feel like things are more divisive now or more vitriolic now than they were in the past? And if so, what are a few things that you would contribute that to? Or do you think it's always been this bad?
I do think things are more polarized, more divisive, and more toxic than in the 42 years since I predicted Ronald Reagan's reelection in April 1982, when 60% of Americans thought he was too old to run again, and his approval ratings were historically low.
Well, yeah, when right-wingers complain about social media, that's the big point here. When the left is in charge of the culture, they had cancel culture for a little bit, but that went by very quickly. Whenever liberals are in power, they use that power in a very weak manner. But when very far-right authoritarians get power, they use it ruthlessly. They will do anything to maintain and capture more power. And we saw this even with Merrick Garland waiting to charge Trump with federal crimes to have an actual federal prosecutor. And now we're going to run out of time. And a person who should be charged for treason against the United States is a couple votes away from being in the White House again and having full immunity from the Supreme Court and being able to pardon any militia group that he wants. I don't know what you mean by the fundamentals all favor Republicans. I don't know what fundamentals you're talking about, because voter registration, early voting, and also key demographic categories. So, for example, Republican white women and Republicans in general, as well as independents, are going pretty strongly for Harris, especially in the past 3 weeks, the more Donald Trump deteriorates. So I'm not sure what fundamentals you mean. So you can let us know about that if you have them.
Oh, and by the way, although I've been accused of partisanship on both sides.
Oh, yeah. Even with Hispanic voters, especially after the Univision town halls, Harris has one of the largest polling shares of Hispanic voters of any Democratic candidate. I say that like I'm comparing tons of them. But compared to Hillary and Biden, she's doing very well now with Hispanic voters.
My predictions are totally nonpartisan. They have nothing to do with my political views. I've predicted the two most conservative presidents of our time, Reagan and Trump, and predicted liberals like Obama. If I predicted according to my political views, I'd be useless. I wouldn't have correctly called the last 10 elections. But I do feel something different. I've experienced a lot more hate this time than I ever had in my 42 years as a forecaster. And I have never before seen a political candidate who basically says, if I win, my term will be dedicated.
No, I'm saying that the Univision town hall happened and those numbers were already going that direction, and Donald Trump had a terrible performance and Harris did very well. But Harris did very well a few days ago, so some of them polls have been done already, but we haven't seen the effects of Trump's town hall yet with them.
To taking revenge.
I think she did. Didn't she do hers like last week or something?
If I win, my term will be dedicated to taking revenge against my political.
Okay, so right now in Pennsylvania, there are around 3.6 million Democrats and 3.3 million Republicans registered. I saw the Republican numbers. When it comes to new voter registrations, I think there might be recent registrations that are higher for Republicans versus Democrats, but in Pennsylvania at least, Democrats still outnumber Republicans, and Kamala is still getting more independents than Trump is. So those fundamentals are pretty sound.
Win, my term will be dedicated.
Yeah, but we don't care about nationwide. We care about what states. We care about Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and Wisconsin. I think Michigan's in the bag pretty much. But there is a chance that the dark money from Elon Musk and Vladimir Putin is going to help Jill Stein take Michigan from Kamala so they can celebrate when the when things get even worse. Thank you, Jill Stein.
Who basically says, if I win, my term will be dedicated to taking revenge against my political opponents, which could be anyone that he decides he doesn't like and wants to go after. He said he's going to be a dictator on day one. I've never heard that before. No, he said it's going to be to drill, drill, drill. But drilling doesn't take place overnight. It takes months and years. And no dictator in the history of the country who's been a dictator on day one has ever.
You also need to think about how there was no primary for the Democrats either. So having no primary for the Democrats in 2024, less voters in a state like Pennsylvania, which has closed primaries, less voters are going to be worried about being a part of a political party. I know voters who are always registered independent, but they register Democratic for just primaries. And many of those voters are now back to being independent again. And the numbers are still good even with that. But if there was a Democratic primary that was contested in Pennsylvania, I guarantee you those numbers would be different, at least in the primary. But things are tracking pretty well.
Voluntarily given up power. He said, you're not going to have to vote again, my dear Christians, if you vote for me.
Oh, don't worry about it. I feel the same way. I feel just as negative. Like I'm thinking right now of doomsday scenarios where Donald Trump is, like I said, is leading militia forces in the U.S. He's talking right now about the enemy within being radical left and Democrats or whatever. That's literally the precursor for calling for death runs from militias. So if Donald Trump gets mad, he can say, hey, law enforcement is not going to take care of this. The military is not going to. You're going to have to take this up in your own hands. And we've already had like county sheriffs in Ohio and a couple of different states say they want to keep track of where the Harris supporters are, so they can keep watch of them. So if Donald Trump says something like, hey, we need to take care of the radical left in America, if anyone's affiliated with them, you need to go take it in your own hands, go to your little militias. You could play soldier. Yeah, I'm worried about that. And then Donald Trump can pardon anything that happens as a result of that. He is crazy enough. Don't think he's not crazy enough, because he is. That's definitely a possibility. I just don't know how bad it would actually get.
Given up power. He said, "You're not going to have to vote again, my dear Christians, if you vote for me this time." Well, under the protection of the Supreme Court's immunity decision, he could declare martial law, confiscate the ballots, essentially establish authoritarian rule over the United States. And he seems to love authoritarians, even giving desperately needed COVID tests to the murderous thug Putin when they were in such shortage in the US and could have cost lives. He's reprised the worst elements of our past, talking about bad genes, which is reminiscent of the horrific eugenics.
Thank you for joining. Please drop a like on the stream. And also, Kamala's campaign's ground game is far surpassing that of Donald Trump's. The organization, the number of rallies, the direct engagement with voters. There are many voters that are not being counted by polls who are, I know many old Republicans who are voting Democrat for the first time in their life in a presidential election. So there are many things at hand, but none of this matters. The polls don't matter. Every single presidential election, the polls tighten up at the very end, and you can't really tell who's in a clear lead. It was the same with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Those polls crashed together to become very tight before the election. Same with Biden. He was up by like 10 points a few months before the election, then he crashed back down. And it was a dead heat for him and Trump, and he ended up winning by 10 million votes. So it's hard to tell. There's no reason to even look at polling data at this point. If you want to get involved, but polling data doesn't tell us anything at all. And pollsters are doing some really weird things right now. There's a chance they're overrating Harris. There's a chance they're overrating Trump. There's probably a better chance they're overrating Trump because they're like really scared to give Trump bad polls for whatever reason because they don't want to upset him.
Movement of the early 20th century that resulted in the sterilization of thousands of people, horrible restrictive immigration laws. He's called his enemies vermin, reminiscent of the worst and most murderous dictators. So yes, I do see something new and frightening. And as I said, I've never been fought before, and I'm 77, been frightened for the safety of myself and my family. I am now.
Why do you think things are like this? How do you think the conservative movement got so, I don't want to say bad, but there's a type of populist anti-establishment rhetoric that I think is pervasive among the right now, that feels like it goes a little bit harder, a little bit deeper than it has in the past, right? Whereas conservatives maybe historically have been like, oh, I don't know how I feel about schools. You know, they wouldn't have said, I don't trust every part of the government. You wouldn't see the conservative movement in the past saying things like, I don't even trust the FBI. I don't trust any of the intelligence. I don't trust the military. I don't trust big corporations. I don't trust any of these things. Why do you think it's gotten so bad specifically on the right?
Well, I think it's in part Donald Trump.
Obviously Donald Trump, and overall the Republican Party's always been what Donald Trump is. But also it makes no sense just thinking from a pure fundamentals, and I mean fundamentals as in real life, unless if the internet took over this much. But Donald Trump right now, after a terrible month of so much negative media and Harris giving really strong performances, Donald Trump is polling better now than he ever has in his entire political life. He is polling higher now than ever before, but that doesn't match up with literally anything at all. The ground game's not there. The funding isn't there. And like I said, it could be that the media and the internet is manipulating things to such a high extent. But it just doesn't make sense that Trump would have his highest numbers right now, after everything we know, after his performance in the debate being so terrible. And if people really are supporting him at the highest numbers now than ever before after that debate performance and after this campaign, then America has much bigger problems than Donald Trump, because at that point the voters are so misinformed at such a large scale, and propaganda has taken over so easily that we're gonna have, I don't even know, like we're talking about AI robots being humanoid robots, but we basically have AIs walking amongst us at that point. So you just have to hope and pray that people are, I don't even know. It's hard to say. But yeah, I think things are going pretty good for Harris. I think the pollsters have no idea what they're doing now. I don't think it matters. I care about making sure the votes are counted correctly on election day. That's the only thing that matters. If the votes are counted correctly, then Kamala will win. But I guarantee you, like I said, they need a buffer zone because some votes are going to be thrown out. A decent number are going to be thrown out.
You know, a uniquely toxic, egomaniacal
Like they're
political.
changing some election laws right now to try and make sure some more mail-in ballots get thrown out.
Figure, but I think you're not quite correctly
Republicans will do
representing the
anything, bro.
conservative movement.
They do not care.
Because Donald Trump,
It's
while
terrible.
an anomaly in terms of his personality, is not an anomaly in terms of the history of the conservative movement. What was the big grassroots conservative movement in the 1920s that elected senators, governors, congressmen, members of state legislatures? The Ku Klux Klan, which was virulently and bitterly anti-Black, anti-Catholic, anti-Jewish. Have we forgotten Joseph McCarthy, in a sense, kind of a Trump before Trump, who went after homosexuals, alleged radicals, ruined people's lives? Have we forgotten that to date, the most intrusive government program was not instituted by liberals, it was instituted by conservatives, the prohibition movement. It killed an industry. It destroyed the laws of nearly half the states. It tripled the law enforcement budget of the federal government. It spawned organized crime. And we're seeing that now being reprieved.
Yeah, but conservatives and Republican politicians are so good at shameless lying. It doesn't matter what bad things they've done throughout history, especially when people can't experience it themselves, because they're not going to pick up books. They're not going to write essays that are peer reviewed or whatever. Many people don't ever need to provide a standard of evidence for what they believe. So we can talk about failures Republicans have had, but people don't. I don't know. People can get mad over different things and just be mad at the world in general. And it's intoxicating to be mad at things. That's one big appeal of Donald Trump. He's one of the most weak and fragile people of all time, and he's a strength symbol for them, which is wild. Do you think Biden would have been able to win? No. Nope. I think Biden would have lost New Mexico. I think Biden would have lost Pennsylvania. I think New York would have been a nail biter. Biden probably would have lost. I don't even know. Yeah, no, that would not have gone good at all. But here's one thing. Kamala being a woman, okay? If you take Kamala Harris and you literally change her into a man, and someone made the joke, we need trans Kamala. But if Kamala was a man with her same policies, her same words, her same campaign, she would be blowing Trump out. I promise. I have talked to so many male voters who are considering voting Biden, but now that Kamala's the nominee, they go on angry rants about how she slept her way to the top and how a woman can't be president and how women can't lead. The sexism is so powerful, especially among white women. Funny enough, because white women are still voting for Trump by majority. But Kamala is making some inroads there.
In the attempt to deport, every immigrant. That would be even more intrusive than prohibition. Immigrants don't live in separate communities with big signs saying undocumented immigrants live here. They're integrated into the entire population. They're married to citizens. They're married to legal residents. Their kids are citizens. Their kids are legal residents. You would literally have to demand the papers and proof of many tens of millions of persons if you wanted to deport undocumented immigrants. And of course, if you wanted to establish a fetal life law, you would then have the federal government intruding in the reproductive lives of women across the country. So I think, Trump is a uniquely toxic personality, but I don't think it's just Trump. I think that's a big mistake.
And mark my words, if Donald Trump wins the presidency and is able to survive being president because he's very old and sick and he's currently slowly decaying as a human being, if he's able to win, we are going to have one of the greatest economic crashes since the Great Depression. He's going to be the next Herbert Hoover. Like, he will be. Once he destroys everything the federal government does, he politicizes the Federal Reserve. He removes every worker who knows how government works from the government, replaces them with MAGA loyalists, so none of government can function correctly. Things are going to get terrible. And also, foreign policy, American national security is going to suffer. We're not going to invest nearly enough in cybersecurity. Ukraine's going to be conquered by Russia. Palestine's going to be, instead of Free Palestine, it's going to be Remember Palestine if Trump wins. I mean, that might happen now. with the path we're on, but much quicker under Trump. But yeah, if Trump wins, we're gonna have a global. The entire globe is gonna shift so rapidly, in a very bad way. And I'm just hoping the recorrection does not take a lot of death, because usually when that happens, when someone like Trump reaches the presidency with so much authoritarian powers and no checks and balances, the reset for people to realize like, oh crap, we're going down the wrong path, usually takes a lot of violence. So ideally, we're in the modern era, we're in 2024, we could avoid that by seeing it rise up, realizing the trends in history, squashing it, and planning a new way forward. But it does not seem like we're in a great position to do that. And the internet and artificial intelligence coming up is probably what makes it so strong right now as a possibility to continue down a bad road. Artificial intelligence and AI pictures and videos and deepfakes and Elon Musk, all of these things could not have came at a worse time. Like, it's so funny this technology came out right before this election of all the elections.
If Trump blit it out tomorrow, I don't think there'd be that much change in the modern.
Oh, I think the media is definitely complicit. They have all their rich friends, and Donald Trump was at the dinner tonight at the fundraiser, the Al Smith fundraiser, whatever. They're definitely complicit. The liberals have always, throughout history, been very nice to authoritarian fascist types. They feel bad. They want to be very decorum. They want to seem like they're not taking sides at all, even if they should be. Just like they're doing now, because they're like, hey, Donald Trump, I want to interview you. And Donald Trump's like, no, you can't fact check me if I come. And they're like, yes, Master Trump, I won't fact check. I'm not going to fact check you. Don't worry. Yeah, they're definitely complicit. They're never hard enough against this stuff. And it happens over and over and over again. And I guarantee you, it's because of class. It's because of the class they're in. It's because of the money they have. It's because of the access they have. They are all friends still. And they don't think Trump's serious. They never think they're serious. They don't think Trump's actually going to go far with his plans, enough to radically change the earth. But now the media is taking a turn in the past week, which is giving me hope that we have enough time before the election, because now I'm seeing them call Donald Trump, closer to being, using the word fascist, using the word nativist, using the word nationalist, because now they heard him say, the media, radical left, whatever, etc., all my enemies are the enemy within. And we are going to handle them with the military. And if the military doesn't do it, then our supporters and militia forces are going to do it. And I think the media is finally getting a little bit scared, because they realize they'll be in the crosshairs if Donald Trump's able to really accomplish his plan for retribution.
Republican conservative movement.
What do you think is the future of the conservative movement?
No, not just because of tariffs, because Donald Trump wants to take apart the federal government by any means necessary. Every aspect of the federal government Donald Trump wants to ruin. He'll just put the entire government at a gridlock until he gets what he wants, which is to destroy everything. And the tariffs as well. Terrible economic plan. But he doesn't have a plan. Donald Trump has no plan. There is no policy. He doesn't care about tariffs. He's going to go in and try to destroy the government. That is the goal of Donald Trump. They are all chaos agents to try and do the lifelong goal of these authoritarians, which is to destroy the federal government and be able to start another, Articles of Confederation or whatever. I don't even know.
After Trump. Well, actually, wait, let me ask one quick question, because I said this completely incorrectly before. In 2020, when Trump lost, or didn't lose, I guess, depending on who you ask. But for the rest of us, when Trump lost in 2020, I figured he wouldn't run again. You can't lose an election and then rerun against the same guy that you lost to 4 years later. He's already, like, there's just no way. And he did. If Trump loses this election, do you think he'll run again in 2028, or do you think he'll kind of step aside? Will the Republican Party tolerate it? Will the constituents be too supportive of him for him to leave? Like, what do you think will happen?
Well, the Republican Party is so sycophantic, is so united behind Trump. I think, sure, they would nominate him again. But, he's going to be 82 years old. He's not in the greatest of health. I'd be really surprised if he was vigorous and sharp enough to run 4 years from now. I have a lot of problem with the mainstream media. I go back to the old saying reiterated by many philosophers. It's not just the evil people who wreak havoc on our world. It's the good people who don't do enough to stop them.
Think about like Dana Bash Is it Dana or Dana? Dana Besh. Her first question in the Kamala Harris interview, it was Kamala's first interview a couple months ago, or 1 month ago. I forget. But the first questions were, Americans were so much better under Trump's economy. Do you agree with Bidenomics? It's like that was CNN. That was the liberal media, although we know CNN's very centrist or center right. But that was the liberal media's question for Harris. All the framing is set by the right so aggressively, and the media falls in line with it because now the big talking point is if the people feel this way, it may as well be true. They're like surpassing postmodernism. Like, talk about feels over facts, bro. We care about facts in the conservative. I miss the Ben Shapiro, bro. I miss the Ben Shapiro era. Now they're literally saying like, oh, the Haitian story is not true, but the constituents, some constituents feel like it's true. Oh, the economy's doing good, but people feel like the economy's doing bad. Oh, Donald Trump's terrible, but some people like Donald Trump. It's like, bro, it's your job. You're the media. It's your job to make sure people have the right information on these things, and they probably wouldn't believe it. They would not believe the things they currently believe if the media was doing their job. Stop asking Kamala Harris why people agree with Donald Trump when you don't cover how Donald Trump is asking to dismantle the entire federal government and kill political dissidents using the U.S. military. Like,
and the media has been very much complicit with Donald Trump. You know, they've given him immense coverage because he creates ratings. You know, every day during his trial, Trump goes out, speaks uncontested, lies, you know, attacks the judge, attacks the judge's family, attacks the justice system, and
exactly
says the same thing. And yet the media reports it every single day.
And listen to that as well. Not only will the economy crash, but what happens in all of these situations, and this is why chaos is the #1 game, okay? Because they want everything to fracture, because if everything fractures, then Elon Musk and Donald Trump and all the oligarchs can take as much power as they want at a much higher and accelerated rate. This is why leftist accelerationists are the dumbest people on the planet, because they always say about, you know, society needs a radical shift, but they don't realize that radical shift is always going to go fascist. But when society does fall apart, what's going to happen when the economy crashes as a result of Donald Trump's bad policies and taking apart the federal government? He's going to blame the black and brown people. He's going to blame the immigrants. So when we talk about how is Donald Trump going to deport 15 million people, Donald Trump's not going to. Border Patrol's not going to. The U.S. military is not going to. It's going to be like what they tried doing in the UK, where people and militias are going to try to take it into their own hands. And if the economy truly crashes, then people are going to go crazy and blame it all on immigrants. And AI and artificial intelligence and X.com is all going to encourage that. And this is the big point behind all these idiots on Twitter and some people who are not that experienced, so younger groups who are progressives, who are not voting for Harris or who are not supporting Harris. They do not realize how quickly this can go downhill extremely fast. Like, they don't realize how quickly the entire world's fabric can shatter out of this one situation. They don't realize what the immunity and presidential pardon powers will allow Donald Trump to actually do when he gets in office. They don't realize it. They never experienced huge tragedy within the U.S. They never experienced historical wars fought on the U.S. soil. We haven't had to. We've been spoiled in America in that sense. We don't understand that, and we have not done the homework for people and voters to understand the path we're going down now. Because when we talked about Hitler in elementary school, which was the only time these people talked about history, they just said, oh, Hitler's bad and he's racist, and they moved on. They never talked about the actual authoritarian nature of this stuff. They never talked about how that same, you know, rhetoric is being used right now. Because that'd be partisan.
Plus, they are far too much treating this election as though it were a normal election of policy clashes.
Oh, yeah, they both have housing policies. Kamala Harris wants to give tax credits and some different incentives for businesses and, you know, building homes and helping first-time home buyers. And the housing policy for J.D. Vance and Donald Trump is they want to deport 25 million people, which is going to free up supply. Totally normal and good and legitimate policies on both sides.
It's not a normal election of policy clashes. Policy is irrelevant to Donald Trump. He couldn't care one whit about policy. He cares about imprinting his stamp on the government,
True.
which means enriching himself, destroying his political opponents, snuffing out the free press, very much. And he's,
Yeah,
you know,
it's an ego
he's been
contest.
explicit about this. It's not like you have to discern it. Who's his big buddy who he's embraced? Viktor Orban of Hungary. And what has Viktor Orban done? Destroyed the political opposition and destroyed the free press. You know, the press spent 2 weeks, headlines every single day, blasting Biden for so-called, you know, mental decline, perhaps legitimate. Why aren't they spending every single day blasting Donald Trump for his?
And this is finally happening. And this is a silver lining with the media's failures, is because people, especially now, have the brains of goldfish. And what was talked about a month ago or 2 months ago, I doubt many Americans even remember Donald Trump almost got assassinated. Wild. But the fact that the media is now correcting themselves, and the media is now finally talking about Donald Trump's issues with age, talking about his comments about authoritarianism and wanting to use the U.S. military as an arm for his own doing, and the National Guard, he wants to use it against political opponents. The fact they're covering the age issues now, leading up to the election on October 17th, we would rather that coverage happen now in these final 2 weeks versus happen a month ago. So that's the silver lining in their failures. If they try to make up for it now, if the media does better now, that can adjust more of those undecided voters who are voting off of TikToks and whatever.
His obvious decline, you know, he rants incoherently for his lives and for his clear and present danger to the survival of our democracy and the freedom and safety of every American. You know, I'm always reminded of the statement during Nazi Germany of Pastor Niemöller, where he said, first they came for the Jews, and I didn't care because I wasn't Jewish. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't care because I wasn't Catholic. Then they came for the communists, and I didn't care because I wasn't communist. And then they came for me. We have no idea who Trump is going to come for once he becomes president, protected by the Supreme Court's immunity decision. You know, a prosecutor who is involved in Watergate recently wrote a column saying, if the Supreme Court's immunity decision had been in effect in the 1970s, then Richard Nixon could have done worse things than he did in Watergate, got away with it scot-free, and our democracy would have died 50 years.
And also, back when Nixon was running, everyone had to engage with politics on a much more personal level. If you knew who was running, you had to read newspapers, you had to be talking in a town square, you had to be going to town halls, you had to be actually talking about these policies with other people. Your understanding of these issues and people who decided to go out and vote, they had to have this intimate experience with voting, very intimate. But now they just see a meme, and that meme has tons of dopamine attached to it, and that meme's very scary, and their phone screen is blasting their brain chemicals, and now they can just get scared instead of, you know, the 1970s, we're reading the newspaper, talking about what the actual policies are, talking about what candidates said. Now it's just Kamala with devil horns and a picture of a non-white person holding a knife, and it says Kamala's going to let immigrants sexually assault your daughter, and that's the whole political engagement now. And you could argue McCarthyism was very similar, and some aspects of Nixon and Reagan were, but they did not get nearly as far. McCarthy got disgraced for a reason, because there was a huge rejection of him, and there was no social media at the time. But Nixon and Reagan, they were held to a different standard based on the era they were in, and also the other politicians actually holding them to account and other members of government.
Years ago.
One of the difficult challenges of the early, I guess, like presidency of Donald Trump was I noticed that media was having this weird issue where Trump was doing a lot of unprecedentedly bad things that probably should have been called out. Oh
yeah, by the way, thank you guys for coming to hang out. These streams are very casual. Usually get between 10 and 20 viewers. Really cool to hang out. These are also my practice runs where I get to just like rant and try different talking points and different like ways to attack these issues, so I can then use that for the video, the actual videos I do. So yeah, thanks for hanging out during these. Really cool. Yeah.
the I
Steelers.
guess like presidency of Donald Trump was I noticed that media was having this weird issue where Trump was doing a lot of unprecedentedly bad things that probably should have been called out or things that needed to be commented on. But you ran into this world where when you commented on it, people would start saying, wow, you are deranged. You have Trump derangement syndrome. You're just calling him out over and over again. It's so unfair. And then it feels like the media kind of receded and they're like, okay, well, let's not call him out as much on things because everybody just thinks we're obsessively, hateful of him. And I feel like we're in this weird world now where even when conservatives aren't on the network, conservatives are still able to control the narrative because they've imprinted so much in the mind of the media that they have to be fair. And I'm not saying that they have to be fair, but I was screaming on my stream at my monitor when I'm watching, them talk to walls, and they're like in the 1980s or whatever, you said that you went to China and you were there 3 months after, or for Tiananmen Square, and how could you say this or whatever? And they treated that question the same as for JD Vance. They were like, would you help Trump steal the election again, or would you help, or do you believe in the results of the election? They're like these.
Yeah, and they only did that because they wanted to ask equal questions. So they brought up some random story about Tim Walz going to China, just so they can set up the question to JD Vance about Donald Trump and stealing the election. But you shouldn't need to give a precursor. That is a sign you're in an abusive relationship if you have to give a reason and justification for doing the right thing. You should be able to call out JD Vance. It's that bad. If you're searching for things about Tim Walz to bring up that the question can sound almost as negative as the question you're going to ask JD Vance, that should not be put on Walz. JD Vance is that bad. He is lying that much. Put it on JD Vance only. Ask Walz a regular question. Who cares if you seem biased? You should not give up reality, ever. That should be a core journalistic principle. Yeah, thanks for hanging out. You could check here at like 10 p.m. Eastern time. I'm usually on here a couple nights a week. I don't have a consistent streaming schedule. If you are in the Discord, we could talk about different times. If people in the Discord say there's a time they want me to stream and cover something, I've been asking for a long time to have a group of people who just like tell me what videos to watch and react to, because I cannot find this stuff. I have an actual job and another job, and I'm really busy. So any help is always appreciated on that front. And I'm also preparing some videos that I'm actually writing a script for, leading up to the election, trying to get my rhetoric to be really tight. A couple mini speeches. It's gonna be really fun.
These questions
Yeah,
are the
thanks for
same
hanging
thing. Like
out.
they mean the same thing. Like they matter as much for a candidate, for vice president, to be fair, not president, but this obsession with the media to try to remain impartial, or at least to be perceived as impartial, sometimes I feel like causes them to I guess, like cede more ground to the conservative argument than they should be. What do you think? What is your suggestion of how the media should navigate that environment? Where if you cover Trump honestly, you're going to look like you're an unhinged, obsessive hater. And if you try to be more fair, you end up just sane washing what is an insane campaign.
You put your finger right on the truth here. I've said for a long time, you could define Republicans and Democrats or liberals and conservatives in one sentence. Republican conservatives have no principles. Democratic liberals have no spine. And I think that's still correct. Republicans clearly have no principles because it
Yeah, that'd be a sick t-shirt. I need to make a t-shirt about that. I feel like I could sell it to every Jill Stein voter. I can make bank.
doesn't matter what Donald Trump does to destroy our democracy, to undermine our society, to threaten our freedoms. It makes absolutely no difference to them. They care about one and only one thing, and that is seizing and maintaining power. But as you say, liberals and Democrats aren't playing hardball like the Republicans do. They're playing wiffle ball. They're afraid, as you said, to be called out and to be considered unfair and to be considered political. And, the poster child for this, I hate to say it, is an old buddy of mine. I've known him for 60 years and more. Friend of mine. Thought he was maybe the greatest federal judge of his time. You know who I'm talking about?
No, shut up.
Merrick Garland.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Of being seen as political that he diddled for almost 2 years before he did what was obvious. Appoint a special prosecutor to investigate the way in which Trump was trying to undermine it.
Yeah, and now they don't have enough time to actually get a trial through, and it's going to be delayed until after this. Oh, man. That really is a blunder.
Democracy and steal an election. We all know what he did right after January 6th. Why wait almost 2 years? It is the classic example of what I said. It's not just evil people. It's good people who don't do enough to stop them. And that's happened with the rise of every internal dictator. Democrats and liberals, and in particular press, have to grow a spine, forget about the criticism, and tell the truth. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And they're not doing that. They're not doing their job. If there's, one word or maybe 2 words, I would eliminate from the English language, it's both sides. It's not both sides. You know, whatever you may think of Harris, you may hate her policies. She's a mainstream politician, same kind of politician we've had for decades. You know, whether it be George W. Bush, Gerald Ford, Barack Obama, she's not going to threaten our society and our democracy. Trump is different and has got to be treated as different. You know, we have all this criticism of Harris. Oh, she's not specific enough with her policies. Big deal. They're all going to change anyway when she gets into Congress, when she gets into office, and has to deal with the Congress and interest groups. And meanwhile, every day, Trump is saying things that threaten our survival as a society, and they're kind of treating them as equal.
One of the things that I've kind of realized as a, so I do a lot of like political debate basically, and it's very frustrating that in my world, I mean, I try to do research, I try to be very fact-based, but when I'm arguing with people, I notice that sometimes there's a different set of rules that, especially on the conservative side, you can kind of bounce from thing to thing to thing to thing, and you might not know anything about a particular thing, but when you land on something, you decide to fight on that hill and die on it, but you'll be ignorant of everything else. So for instance, if you were to ask a conservative, do you know anything about false slates of electors in 2016? I don't even know what an elector slate is. Okay. Do you know anything about Jared Kushner, Saudi Arabia? No, I don't know anything about that. Okay, do you know anything about, Trump's New York State case or what happened at Mar-a-Lago? I know that it was all corrupt. Okay, well, do you know anything about Hunter Biden? Oh, Hunter Biden worked for Burisma for these years. I know that he communicated with this prosecutor. I know, blah, blah. Like, they know everything about these particular facts, that they've seen disseminated on right-leaning media over whatever particular conspiracy they believe in, right? They can give you the exact number of cats and dogs that they think were eaten in Springfield, or they can tell you exactly how many machines are creating the hurricanes for Florida, whatever. They have all these things in their mind. How do we fix, like, the media environment where half of America right now.
Trump wrote him a thank you letter for making that prediction? Really? That's hilarious. That's something Trump would do. He doesn't understand anything except making himself look good, so someone can just be doing like a regular prediction. And he'll think that they did it just to please him because he wanted a favor, maybe. Yeah, he was saying that Trump's fans are like very violent towards him now. And most of the time, this guy reminds me of a professor I had. He was in his 70s as well. And they just know. They've just seen these political trends happen for so long. They can easily predict, and humans are very predictable, but, they could easily predict all the stuff that's going to be happening and all these movements.
Now is literally living in a different world. Like, it is a different set of facts, and there's no way to reconcile, because at the end of the day, if I tell you 10 million illegals are coming across the border or 500,000, you don't know. You have no idea. You're never going to know, and you're never going to have an idea of it. But whatever somebody tells you, believe. How do you reconcile that? Do you need legislation? Is it a culture change? Yeah. What is your suggestion for that, or what do you think?
Well, you put your finger on something extremely important, and that is the big lie. It has been the staple of dictators throughout history. People are not fact checkers, as you point out. If you say something loudly and long enough from an authority figure who you admire, people will come to believe it.
I know some people, we were talking about crime, and they knew nothing about crime data. And I showed them the graph of like the 50-year crime drop and how safe it is in certain cities. It's someone that thinks if you go to an American city, you're going to die, like the moment you step foot in there. And all of a sudden, he had all the facts on why the FBI was hiding, reporting all of the true crime numbers, and the FBI is controlled, and they're selectively choosing precincts and leaving out certain precincts to make sure that the crime number keeps on going lower. They do turn into experts whenever it suits them. They're so, and you have to think it's a combination of being misinformed, being stubborn, and also just being generally untruthful, whatever. Because once someone is disproved, they don't change their stance, and they will continue saying things they know to be not true out of spite sometimes, and they're proud to be wrong. That's one of the worst people ever. It's like if they're proud to be dumb, like they're like bragging, like, haha, you know facts, don't you, buddy? You know all the data, huh? But have you questioned if you know my personal experience?
What is new? It is social media, which divides us into bubbles, impenetrable bubbles. As you say, if you're in the right-wing bubble, you're being fed all this stuff about Hunter Biden and the Biden crime family and 10 million bloodthirsty, undocumented immigrants ready to slit your throat, and you don't get any alternative information. It never gets through the bubble. It's just the swamp. It's the commies. It's the liberals. We don't even have to listen to that. As you say, we don't even know about it because it never, ever reaches us. And I have a book on everything. I have 14 books. This is called 13 Cracks, Repairing American Democracy After Trump, in which I talk about we've got to go after these media companies and begin to change the algorithms and open things up and break these bubbles.
I wrote a research paper about that. How algorithms should be considered. The damage caused by algorithms cannot be considered fully free speech, and if it is considered free speech, and social media platforms can make any algorithm they want and not have any consequences, then we need some type of law. And I'm gonna repeat this a million times in the next 5 years, if I survive. We need a law. So many states make you verify your ID to go on a porn site or to go on a gambling site. You have to scan your ID, put your social security number in, all that kind of stuff. In order to have social media companies be operating in some safe capacity without having to challenge them legally when it comes to their rights as a publisher or a platform, whatever, we would need to pass some type of law where you need a valid government ID to have a social media account, because every post on the internet should be able to be tied back to someone. They are way too damaging to not have this in place. If you see misinformation, you should be able to see who posted it, when they posted it, and their government name. You should have to stand on business, bro. If you're going to be posting some dumb stuff, you should have to own it. And we need to be able to call people out directly. No more 5,000 account bot farms. 13 really is this guy's number. Yeah, 13 is a great number. That was my lucky number growing up. I'm sure there's some significance, right?
It's really hard to do, but it's absolutely essential. I also pointed out there are now techniques that are very good. They've even better refined since I wrote the book, I think in 2021, for instant fact checking. You can't just let people lie blatantly without fact checking them. Trump says, I ordered 10,000 National Guardsmen to protect the Capitol, and Nancy Pelosi rebanded the order. Well, one, there was no such order. His own officials said there was no such, and Nancy Pelosi has nothing to do with security of the Capitol. Or he says, everyone agreed we should overturn Roe versus Wade and bring it back to the states. Well, every survey shows over 60% of Americans thought just the opposite, that Roe versus Wade should not be overturned. Not difficult to fact check these and put it right up there on the screen every time someone...
I wouldn't be surprised if South Korea did it. But the best thing is, you can have this happen. You don't need to be... you do not need federal law because these states have the porn laws and the gambling laws state by state. So we can hypothetically have certain information havens. So that's an interesting term. But yeah, information havens where, like, blue states, for example, once you're in there, when you go on social media, they verify your zip code. And I'm sure people will get VPNs, whatever. But you need that government ID still. If you're in a blue state and they see you're in there, you need to verify your ID. And then if you go back to a state that doesn't have that law, then you don't need to. But yeah, we can do it state by state. We don't need to rely on federal legislation for that, which is also cool.
One says one of these blatant lies. I understand there are gray areas where it may be difficult. But when Donald Trump speaks or J.D. Vance speaks, or Haitians eating cats and dogs, it's not gray area. It is readily acceptable to fact checking, and it should be. And again, the media shouldn't be afraid of being accused of being biased. Fear is the killer. And unfortunately, too many of the good people in our society are paralyzed by fear.
Yeah, there's this weird continuum fallacy thing that happens where people are like, well, how would you fact check a claim? And they'll pretend that the claim is like, minimum wage is good for the poorest of workers. And it's like, okay, that's a difficult claim to fact check.
That is.
Machines creating hurricanes, or FEMA preventing supplies from getting to people, or FEMA, all the aid is just a loan, they're going to steal your house. These are not difficult claims to fact check. And this, this weird equivalency of like, well, it's hard to fact check the toughest claims ever made in economics. And that's like the same as fact checking, whether Haitian migrant gangs are destroying Ohio. Like these are not the same type of claim. I feel like a lot of issues that come up also, you said this, you alluded to this, and something you just said, that I feel like a lot of Americans just don't understand basic civics. And because they don't understand basic civics, there's a lot of stuff that's immediately inappropriate or not okay, but you have to explain quite a bit to make somebody understand why. Like, for instance, Donald Trump relying on a whole bunch of private legal counsel. That's very weird. That Giuliani and Powell and Eastman and all these guys, these are not White House counsel. These are not counselors to the president of the United States. These are just private lawyers that Donald Trump has hired. And having this kind of breakdown of understanding, or like FEMA, where does the money come from, or who votes on it? Or what is the, the chain of command of this? Like, why didn't Pelosi protect, the Capitol building? It's like, Pelosi's,
The best part is all of this information is spread on copy pastas on Facebook. I saw like 10 family members share the same thing about FEMA providing nothing except loans that you have to pay back with interest or whatever. And at the bottom it said, copy and repaste or repost to make sure everyone hears this. They don't even like write the simple post themselves, bro. They literally do copy and paste or share it. Like, it's so It's such a low level of engagement, and it's so terrible.
Just a member of Congress. Donald Trump is the head of the National Guard that would be deployed to DC. These are just basic civics things. Do you feel like American education or average American understanding of how the government works has gotten worse, or has it always been just kind of whatever and it just hasn't been tested that much? Or
I'm not sure it's gotten worse, but there is a war against knowledge and a war against education. If you read any recent books on how dictatorships take hold, the way in which dictatorships begin is through the manipulation of information and education. That is their technique. And we're seeing that all over red states. They're banning books that present contrary views to conservative orthodoxy. They are forcing teachers to teach false conservative orthodoxy, such as discrimination no longer exists in America. There's no lingering discrimination, even though 99% of the scholarship proves otherwise. They pass legislation. You can't talk about people with alternative lifestyles in the schools. There is a war going on for the truth. And if those who value the truth and not just political orthodoxy lose this war, and then, that is a step on the pathway to.
Also, in general, the voting rate was very low before, and it skyrocketed. We had many more votes cast in 2020 than even 2016. But that also means that many people who vote now were not engaged enough to vote before. And that was before things became more based on disinformation, misinformation, and Donald Trump politics. So the voters that did engage 20 years ago cared more about politics, were more informed about politics. Now we have an even higher percentage of low information voters in the voter pool than we had before.
Losing our freedom and losing our democracy. So I think it is critically important that people who are devoted to the truth, combat what's going on in every possible way, and rededicate ourselves to really sound history and sound civic education. It's a long-term trench warfare. It's not a battle that's going to be won overnight.
Okay, I got two quick ones. One, because I've got a guy that's a big fan of you who fights a lot of my community over this. The first one is, do you still think that Biden would beat Trump in the presidential election if he was still the candidate? And then the second one is...
One at a time.
Oh, yeah.
I'm an old man.
Oh, yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it. Do you think that Biden would beat Trump? Yeah.
I never said that.
Okay.
What I did say was a lot would have to go wrong for Biden to lose, but it could. Never made a final prediction until Biden was out of the picture. I was very critical of what the Democrats were doing, openly trashing viciously their sitting president, right out in public. I've never seen that, and I've studied our politics since the founding. I also thought Democrats were headed for a disaster. That is, that they would push Biden out and then have a big party brawl for his successor. On my 13-key system, that would cost the Democrats 2 keys, the incumbency key and the incumbent party contest key. No White House party since 1900 has ever gotten reelected when they've lost both those keys. But somehow, maybe they listened to me, who knows, I said it a lot, Democrats grew a spine and a brain and united behind Harris and only lost 1 key, the incumbency key. I also noted that the Harris candidacy probably helped the Democrats with 2 other keys, the third party key. Voters didn't have to choose between 2 old white guys anymore. Hate saying that being an old white guy, but it's true. And social unrest, because the unrest had been directed against Biden and he's now in the background. So the keys fully take into account what happened unprecedented within the Democratic Party. I never said, and I never would ever say that Biden would have won, because I don't deal in hypotheticals. And we have no idea what would have happened if Biden stayed in. It was a long time to go and all kinds of things could have happened.
Okay. And then question, I'm just curious, obviously, you've designed the system. I'm sure you've seen a lot of people talk about it. Probably a lot of people talk about it improperly. I've watched a lot of people talk about it who haven't heard you describe, some of the keys. If you could change anything about your system at this point, would you? Would you add one? Would you take one away? Would you change the way that one works if you could change anything at this point?
Terrific question. Every 4 years, someone tells me, you got to change your key. We have an African-American running in 2008. Never had that before. America's not ready to elect an African-American. Got to change your key. We have a woman running. Got to change your key. We have a big October surprise. A major party candidate caught on tape bragging about sexually assaulting women. Got to change your key. Of course, you can't change a model on the fly without producing errors. If I had listened, I would have miscalled 2008 and miscalled my call of a Trump win in 2016. Moreover, the keys are incredibly robust. Predictively, I'm predicting elections since I called Ronald Reagan's reelection in April 1982, When 60% of Americans said he shouldn't run again, he was too old, and his approval ratings were historically low, and people were talking about a one-term presidency like Jimmy Carter. But developmentally, the keys go all the way back to the horse and buggy days of politics, the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860. We had no automobiles, no planes, no polls, no radio, no television. Women couldn't vote. African Americans were enslaved. My ancestors from Eastern Europe weren't here yet. We're an agricultural society. So the keys have survived enormous changes in our society, our demography, our politics, and our economics. That said, look, I'm not psychic Gene Dixon with a crystal ball. I'm not Speaker Mike Johnson who claims the Almighty talks to him. I'm an historian. The keys are based on 160 years of history. They're very robust, but I'm not so arrogant as to say it's impossible that there could be some unprecedented cataclysmic change to shift the pattern of our politics. The problem is you can never know that, just like a scientific revolution. Can't predict it in advance. You can only know it after it has occurred. That's why I don't change my keys on the fly. Can I be wrong? Of course, I'm a human being. Any human being can be wrong.
Gotcha. All right. And then just as a reminder, where are we at right now at this moment in time for Kamala and Trump? How many keys does Kamala have?
Right. The way it works on my 13 keys, which gauge the strength and performance of the White House party, unlike the punditry and the polls, there's a big message here. It's governing, not campaigning, that counts. And that's what the 13 keys gauge. And the way it works, if 6 or more of the keys go against the party holding the White House, they're predicted losers. Fewer than 6, they're predicted winners. So the easiest way to look at it is to tally the keys that are negative for the White House party. They lost the mandate key because they lost U.S. House seats in 2022. They obviously lost the incumbency key. Biden's not running. It's a binary key. They lose the incumbent charisma key. Whatever you may think of Harris, she's only been a candidate for a little while. She hasn't reached the stature of an FDR, a once-in-a-generation, across-the-board inspirational candidate, which is needed to secure that key. So that's 3. They lose the foreign policy failure key. The Middle East is a disaster. It's a humanitarian catastrophe with no end in sight. We might not be fighting those wars, but we have deep interests in the Middle East. That's 4 keys down. That's 2 keys short of the 6 negative keys that would be needed to predict Donald Trump returning to the White House. And so the keys predict we're going to have a path-breaking president, the first woman president, cracking, at least shattering the glass ceiling, and the first president of mixed African and Asian descent. Steve, kind of foreshadowing where our society is going. We're rapidly becoming a majority-minority country. Old white guys like me are on the decline.
All right. Do you think I'll ask a final question, I guess. What do you think are the 2 keys that they're most likely in danger of losing, or that could most, I know you don't predict the exact outcomes of keys in the future.
No, of course
but, yeah,
not.
what do you think are the 2 that would be the ones you'd be worried
Well, the
most about?
shakiest key is the foreign policy success key. I
I'm
give
ready
that
for
to the
bed.
administration because it was Biden and Biden
I'm going to
alone
bed,
who put
man.
together the coalition of the West that stopped Putin from conquering Ukraine and going after our NATO allies and deeply endangering America's national security. Despite very limited Republican support, his support has kept Ukraine alive for more than 2.5 years, even enabled them to make an incursion into Russia. I think this will go down as an historic presidential achievement. But, you know, wars are fluid, and I suppose there could be a catastrophe
Yeah, no
in Ukraine.
principles.
I've also been blasted for not giving the challenger charisma key, which would count against the White House party, to Trump. People say, how can you say Trump's not charismatic? And my answer is simple. It's not what you think of him. It's whether he fits the key, how it's defined and how it's been answered since 1860. And you have to be one of those once in a generation, across the board, inspirational candidates. You can't just appeal to a narrow base like Trump did. In 4 years as president, his approval rating was 41% on average, right at the bottom of presidents. In 2 elections, he lost the vote of the people by 10 million votes. His approval rating has never hit 50%. And in 10 years almost, it's pretty much hovered in the low 40% range. So whatever you think of him, he clearly, it's not close, does not fit the definition.
Yeah, and the fact that Trump's been able to do so many things, and we have so many people who are like not able to vote, either they're undocumented, maybe they felon, or maybe too young. But the fact that 60% of the country did not want Trump, and he's been able to do so much damage, is going to be one of the biggest tragedies of the 2020s and 2016s and all that stuff, as if those are eras yet. We're still living it, man. All right, if anyone's still there lurking, have a good night. I might just start doing, like, maybe I'll do streams at like 10 p.m. at night, because I do have a couple different videos I want to go over, but I always get tired after doing one video, and this has already been like an hour and a half of just like just how it is. Maybe I'll just do a video a night. There's some breaking points, stuff that'd be fun to react to. And I don't really want to react to a video for a half hour offline. That feels really weird to me because I have to react to it for a half hour and then edit it, which is just like, I don't know, might as well stream it if I'm going to be reacting to it. So anyways, have a good night, everyone. Thanks for hanging out.